great abortifacient is, I would say, nature. I don't say God. Of course, God does not decide that so many pregnancies are not carried to full term. Nature knows, in the case of our species, as with every other mammal and primate, that some fetuses are not going to make it and flushes them out. That's just a brute fact. We wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case, because we're, as you know, adapted biologically to an environment we've abandoned, the savanna. That's why we have appendices that are designed for grass eaters, and you know all of this. It's all very well knowable. You can't be having a brood of sickly, half-baked children and get away from the predators. I mean, so nature is the great abortifacient. I certainly don't blame God for it. I do, as a humanist, believe that the concept unborn child is a real one, and I think the concept is underlined by all the recent findings of embryology, and about the early viability of a well-conceived human baby, one that isn't going to be critically deformed, or even some that are, will be able to survive outside the womb earlier and earlier and earlier. And I see that date only being pushed back, and I feel a responsibility to consider the occupant of the womb as a candidate member of society in the future, and thus to say that it cannot be only the responsibility of the woman to decide upon it, that it's a social question and an ethical and a moral one. And I say this as someone who has no supernatural belief.
It's interesting that you use the word value in this, because value is an indication of worth. And I will agree with you entirely. I would not say that human life is priceless. Yes, it's very valuable, but it's not priceless. And at that point, you know, is it okay? How much harm can it do to, I guess, society in general if you abort a fetus, versus how much harm can you do to society if you, let's use the word abort, a medical doctor? So if you look at it from a social perspective, the more you go into, the higher up you go in the spectrum, assuming that the end point would be just normal death of aging kind of thing, the cost first rises, then stagnates, and then starts falling. Mm-hmm. So if you're willing to assign some kind of arbitrary value to life, and you must therefore use the scale, and then you decide what value is okay. But again, that's not a decision I'm willing to make.
This point might not be so relevant to abortion per se, but on the subject of the value of human life, there's some markets in the world that have already decided that without so much as anyone setting the price on their own or arbitrarily picking a number, in the sense that in many places in the world, like for example Sao Paulo, Brazil, people get kidnapped very frequently. In fact, more than one person a day. And the market seems to be about $30,000 a head, depending on if they're a child or if they're an adult, or depending on if they have more money or less money. So you could, in that sense, say that markets can put a value on human life. So it shouldn't necessarily be considered valueless. It's worth as much as people want to pay for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a better example than Brazilian kidnappers, though. If you look at the hospital, that's a direct placement of value, financial value on life. They have a specific budget. They have a certain number of patients. Oh, yeah. They have to specifically allocate not only value to suffering, but not only value to life, but also value to suffering, value to the spectrum of human emotions.
Should there be more, less, or equal amount of abortions? More abortions.
Okay. I think the word I'm tripping up on there is should, because you're kind of making like a moral judgment on something. But I think if you look at birth rates in countries, it tends to be a correlation between the standard of living and the birth rate dropping. So I think you could make the argument that as the number of abortions increases, the standard of life increases as well.
Oh,
or at least they tend to go hand in hand.
Although I would say that it's a correlation, not causation argument.
Okay.
But I would say in terms of abortion, I think whatever way we go on abortion, it is largely, I mean, in an ideal, abortion is probably like physically painful for women and stuff like that. So ideally, I would like to abort abortions by using birth control in the first place. because then it's just not a comfortable physical experience. But at the same time, what I want to emphasize is these arguments that attack abortion by also simultaneously sort of trying to essentially consequentially banning stem cell research and stuff like that are absurd. Because if you look at, a person who's had a, back injury, broke their back, completely paralyzed, blasted with stem cells, they regain a full range of motion throughout their body. It's difficult to look at this and be like, you know what? You just killed 1 million people in order to make this person well.